In the wild, the lamb stands brave.
Yeah. So Ammon, he's when it poses. Oh my gosh, can't talk. Posing the question, "What is a man?"
Yeah.
Like Ammon, like has it all, dude.
Yeah.
He's a man of faith. He trusts God. He works hard. He protects, and he provide. I mean, he does all of it, like all in his mission um, to King Lamoni and his not Lam- yeah King Lamoni
Yeah.
and his people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he did was as soon as he got there, he started serving. Right? He told King Lamoni, he's like, I just want to be your servant.
Yeah.
He's like, what? Okay, go do this. And he was really good servant. And we know the story about how the bullies, the Lamanites, came and they would scatter the flocks and then they would run off or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and make it hard for the servants of Lamoni to like do their job. And a lot of times they would kill the servants for not protecting the flocks. And so Ammon, whenever they did it when Ammon was there, this is like one of my favorite living scripture cartoons, dude.
Dude, I love this story.
Was
It's so good.
when they come to scatter the flocks, and Ammon's like, nah. It's like, nah, ain't happening, dude. Pulls out his sling, just starts lobbing rocks at him and starts killing him.
Yeah.
And then they come across and he pulls out his sword and starts cutting their arms off. And then he takes a bag of arms back to the king, be like, hey, there are a bunch of people trying to scatter your flocks. Here are their arms. And what the?
I know.
Who are you?
It had to be like the biggest eye-opening thing. Yeah. No, Ammon was awesome. I like that. I like the is a juxtaposition where it's like two things that seem like they should be at odds, but they actually like unify together. I like that, you know, and it was the kind of the same with Nephi and stuff too, but in our minds, a good man doesn't kill, doesn't fight. Like, you know what I mean? When you think of like in general, like a good man, like you don't think of someone like that. But it is. And I guess when you look at who we really idolize as a society, there's like Superman would be like probably the closest thing to someone like Ammon. That kind of fights crime, defends the people type thing, and that's what Ammon's doing. But it's cool that he's not exactly like on paper, you wouldn't necessarily, if you had no idea the story, you wouldn't necessarily think that he's a good person just because he's killing people with a sling and lobbing their arms off. But he is.
Right. Yeah, because he was protecting, and back then there was, you try to freaking kill people who are scattering your flocks these days, you're going to get thrown in prison forever.
Yeah.
But you're still allowed to protect your property. You're still allowed to protect your assets.
Not in California.
But that's true.
You're host if you're there, man.
That's true. But part of that is controlling who you are, because I'm sure Ammon stayed in very much control of who he was during that altercation.
Yeah.
And he had the liberty to do whatever was necessary in order to protect the flock.
Yeah.
And so giving that free reign of doing what he needs to do to protect the flock, that's what he ended up doing, was resorting to violence, because that was the only thing that was going to stop it.
Yeah.
But it's and this is like a really touchy subject because don't condone violence unless it's necessary.
Yeah.
And then I absolutely condone violence.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like what Jordan Peterson says. He's like, men need to be capable of violence.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to have the ability to protect and defend when it's needed because eh, like it may never not happen. You and I may never be in a confrontation when we need to escalate to this type of violence. Um, but it could.
Yeah.
Like you never know what the other people are gonna do, who the other people are. Um, I read like, dude, just last weekend when that dude shot up the freaking like splash pad. Did you hear about that in like Detroit?
No.
You didn't hear about it?
Mm-mm.
Jeez, I hate the news.
I don't look at the news, and I'm
Yeah,
hardly on
probably
social
smart.
media.
Probably makes you a happier person overall. No, some dude like is crazy. He's a mental dude. He's off his meds. Um, goes and like shoots up a splash pad randomly. Shoots like 10 people. Like I think 3 of them were kids. Um, and then like goes home and shoots himself. Like like you never know. I would never in a million years think that at the splash pad I need to be on edge and looking for the psycho that's gonna come and like shoot up the splash pad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like unfortunately we're in a world where this same stuff happens that happened in this story with Ammon. Like I used to think hearing this story when I was young, I used to be like, "Oh dude, like Ammon's so lucky that he could like do this type of thing." But like we're there now, you know. The Lamanites, these were Lamanites attacking Lamanites because they didn't have the same stuff. Like they didn't have the same flocks or whatever. Um and we're there now. Like Americans are attacking Americans randomly, and like if you're not prepared to fight back up against this type of thing, like what good are you?
Yeah. Well, and there's the symbolic part of this as well, right? I mean, Ammon is protecting the flock.
Yeah,
He's protecting his flock and doing whatever is necessary to protect the flock.
yeah,
So as men, our flock, our flock first and foremost is our family,
hmm,
wife and kids. Like that's first and foremost. That's who you protect. But in a situation, I'm going to protect them first.
yeah,
They're my number one. If they are safe, my flock is going to be extended to whoever else I can protect.
protect and defend. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and I'm not saying I'm some badass who can go do all this stuff, but that's not the point.
yeah,
Like I've seen I've seen a lot of other social media posts about people talking about this kind of stuff.
yeah,
And then the comment section are like, I bet these guys are pussies. I bet these guys couldn't do anything. And it's
yeah,
like, well, maybe they can't, but guess what? They're at least they're gonna be willing to try to do whatever.
yeah. Which dude is like to me that's the American like spirit. That's the greatness that is America is that we're willing to fight wars for other people's rights and not just protect ourselves. Like you think of like the Civil War, World War One, World War Two. Like America wasn't directly until Pearl Harbor, but like America wasn't directly under fire, and we weren't even Pearl Harbor. Like it wasn't necessarily like a direct problem for mainland America. Um, but like we went and we took care of business when we needed to. Um, and in these type of situations, I feel like it's the same thing. And if you're not willing to have that type of attitude, then like like what good are you?
Hmm.
What are you going to do in that situation?
So in that light of stuff, when are you gonna start training jujitsu then?
I know I need to. Um, I definitely need to. Um, I don't know. Someday I will. Someday I will. I yeah, I need to get fit, and that would be a good way to do it. So I should definitely look into it
It's
some more.
definitely a good way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I should. I prefer. I find more enjoyment with like Yeah, I don't know. Someday I will. Someday I'll definitely get into it. I'm glad you're into it. I don't have to worry as much if someone bursts through the door in here.
I don't know. There's not very much room to be butt scooting in
That's
here.
okay. Anyway, but no, I love that about Ammon, and I love in the first part of in the first part of chapter 17 as I was going through and re-looking at it, it reminded me that the sons of Mosiah, including Ammon, gave up the throne to go and serve these missions to the Lamanites. Um, and I think that that's another important part of being a man is being willing to give up, sacrifice, ease of life for the things that you believe in. Um, and in their instance, obviously it's Christ, it's their testimonies that they have of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But I don't necessarily think that you have to have that. I don't think that needs to be the center thing, but you do need to have beliefs that are central to your core, central to the person that you are, and you have to be willing to give up certain things that we might have in our life, like certain comforts, certain whatever, in order to pursue that and in order to help others kind of see things the same way that you do. And I think Ammon and all the sons of Mosiah and Alma were super good at that. They were willing to sacrifice kingdoms, principalities, ease of life, being a king, and go out and serve these hard missions that were tough and that required them to sacrifice their lives, required them to be willing to subjugate themselves to suffering, to imprisonment, to all sorts of different things that you read through those chapters. And I think that that's a central part of being a man too is being willing to sacrifice those things when necessary for the things that you believe in.
Yeah, and the sacrifice, they were still happy.
Yeah,
They weren't. I mean, sure they had their bad days like everybody else does, but they with them sacrificing those things, they still had that one thing in common of trusting in in the Lord and in His deliverance
yeah,
in one way or another, and um, going through. I mean, it'd be like, hey, I'm gonna go to Afghanistan. I'm gonna go to Afghanistan and start preaching Christ up in the mountains.
yeah. Converting the Taliban.
Yeah, dude, it's like,
It's true.
what?
Like they're like yeah. I've never thought about how similar those are, but that makes perfect sense.
Like,
Like
that's how I think of it.
well, and the Lamanites were similar to Taliban. They're like trained to want to kill Nephites, just like the Taliban's trained and educated to want to kill
Americans.
Americans and Westerners and that whole ideology. It's super similar to that. And it like if you think about that now, it's crazy. It's like there's no way I'm going to
No
Afghanistan
way.
to go try to preach the gospel.
Like, yeah, it's like, all right, God, I trust in your deliverance. I'm going to Afghanistan to preach the gospel. Be like, all right. It's like your deliverance says you're dead.
You're dead. Yeah, exactly.
You've been cleared of this life. You can now go to heaven.
Well, and then like fighting them, like defend. Oh man, it's an interesting. Yeah, I've never even thought of that, but it's super similar to that. Like that's a good way to like apply these scriptures to our time and to what we understand and what we know as like like true. I want to say like evil. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
nowadays, it's like whoa, like that would be pretty major and pretty crazy. That's interesting. I like that a lot. I never thought about that. Um, so I think now that we've kind of defined and talked about how Ammon and the sons of Mosiah, they're men and they're believers in God. I think that applies to what we're trying to do with Wilding the Lamb by giving us more examples of how we should try to apply these similar things in our lives. So like how does Ammon's like steadfastness and his ability to preach the gospel, how can we take that and try to improve us in our situations? Like we know he's a good person. We know he's a good example of a man. What can we actually take and apply from his story and the stories of his brethren?
I think, when I think about it, I think it goes just full circle, just always back to the trust that he had in God.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't have been able to do any of this stuff the way that he did it with the confidence that the scriptures portray him having in doing it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he could have done it to that level without having just complete and total trust in God.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is probably one of the most important things to, like, figure out is trust in God.
Yeah.
And, um, being when you're being a God-fearing man and you're trusting in God that he will take care of whatever. And when you combine trusting in God and seeking God's will, you become unstoppable. Because if you learn what God's will is and then you go to act that out, if you're trusting in God, like, there's no stopping you.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't matter how much persecution, doesn't matter how much pushback, it doesn't matter what comes back at you to try to stop you from doing that. If you trust in God and you know his will on what you're supposed to be doing, there's no stopping you.
I like that. I think I think it's easy for a lot of us to get in the habit of just like living life according to natural man.
Mhm.
Getting our 9 to 5, working, sleeping, being a good dad to your family, and like repeating that process through life. The hard part is figuring out what God's will is for you as a person, and then trying to have confidence in that enough to actually like go through with it like these guys did.
Yeah, but I think it's a lot easier than people give it credit.
Yeah,
um
I guess
because
people make it harder than it
people make it
should
harder
be
than
or
it
need to
should
be.
be. Yeah.
Okay, explain that.
Yeah, because there's there's really three different ways to like know God's will, or to like get your prayers answered about God's will.
Yeah,
Because in order to figure out God's will, you need to be studying and praying and doing your due diligence to figure out his will. But when it comes to, you've been studying it out in your own mind or whatever, and then you take it to God, you're going to receive one of three answers. You're going to receive a yes, a no, or nothing. And if you receive nothing, you you just proceed forward as is if you're doing God's will.
yeah,
Because as soon as you're doing that, you're like, I'm just gonna have faith that I'm doing the Lord's will right now. And if you deviate, you'll know. Like, you'll know,
yeah,
because you'll just, like, I know the feeling of when I do this and I start to deviate from his will. I immediately know. I'm like, "Oh, crap, okay." And then you take it back. "Okay, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Redirect me," whatever.
yeah. Did I'm curious about I believe wholeheartedly in what you said as far as finding his will, but Ammon, well, I mean he could have, but he didn't he didn't need to like constantly be praying and
But he
seeking
probably
answers to
was.
God's wills.
I mean, sure, it doesn't go and say that he was constantly praying, but he probably was constantly praying.
Yeah,
Like, I believe all of them were constantly praying.
yeah,
And he could have even have said, like, what do you want me to do about these bullies scattering the flocks?
Yeah.
Oh, smite them. Like, he could have done that, but he could have just been like, I'm just going to act as the servant of Lemhi,
Lamoni.
Lamoni,
Yeah.
of King Lamoni. And as soon as he pulls out his sling, if he wasn't supposed to do that, he would have known and he would have put it back.
Yeah.
And so he that's another thing with living the gospel and living, like, trying to always do God's will,
Yeah.
is that, as members of the church, as you're living the gospel, you become used to it.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you almost become numb to the feelings of the spirit.
Yeah.
And so, because it's just constant. And so you don't really recognize that the spirit's actually with you until something happens and it goes away.
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh crap, what the heck just happened?" Because you start to live in a constant state of revelation.
So do you think, because I've always looked at it like, and maybe this is just a different way to explain a constant state of revelation. But like I've always thought of it as like if you're living your life in a righteous way and, you know, trying your best to make decisions and live your life the way that God would, then you're in a way acting as God, like as yourself. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so in that way, you're doing God's will. And you don't necessarily need to like pray for every answer, but
Sure.
like you're naturally responding to the world around you in the same way that Christ would. Ideally is like
That's
is that kind of it's the same thing.
yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, I'm referring a lot of the stuff I'm saying is referring to is referencing a talk that Bednar gave. I think it was at a CES fireside.
Yeah, I think we talked about it
Yeah.
months ago probably.
Yeah. So, um, because he was talking about somebody who was like, "How do I know?" It's
That
like
I'm doing God's will.
it was about prayer and getting prayers answers. Like, how do I know? It's like, I pray for this, but I don't really receive anything, or I don't feel anything. And it's like, well, you're not feeling anything because you are actually feeling it and you're just used to it
You're
now.
just used to it.
So now you're just living in a constant state of revelation. So you just go forward as if you're supposed to do that. And then if it's not,
You'll get that gut
you'll
feeling
get
or
that
whatever.
gut feeling that
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
But you might, pray about something and you'll get a really good feeling about it. Like the last time that happened to me was when I switched jobs.
Yeah.
Like when I called my current employer and I was like, "Hey, I want to come back." They're like, "Great, cool. What do you want?" I'm like, "I want this." They're like, "Okay, great. Start tomorrow." I'm like, "What?"
That's
I
awesome.
was like, "That was really easy."
Yeah.
But like after I got off the phone with them, I was like, "Huh, I feel so much peace about what just happened."
Yeah.
Like there was no turmoil like in my brain, in my heart, my soul, nothing.
Yeah.
Like I was like at peace after having that conversation. I'm like, I know I was supposed to do this.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I know I was supposed to come over to the company I'm with now. And so after doing that, like that kind of like helped me understand like myself a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um and once I quit my other job and I switched over, I actually stayed with my other job for 5 additional weeks to help out, like, wrapping up what I was doing and get stuff transitioned and everything.
Yeah.
But as soon as I quit, they ended up, like, firing, like, 7 to 10 people. I don't know, it was 7 to 10 people
Yeah.
that they let go. And I wouldn't have been let go, but my brothers was there working with me, and they were letting go of people who, like, weren't critical to the company.
Yeah.
my brother would have been fired 100%.
Yeah.
I'm friends with one of the owners, and I texted him. I was like, "If I would have stayed, would my brother have gotten fired?" And he's like, "Yes, 100%." I'm like, "Okay."
Awesome. Yeah.
And it was a month after quitting. No, sorry, it was like a week after quitting that it happened.
Yeah.
And so they obviously had plans in the work, and that's why they were like now, like looking back, I understand like why they were having these interviews and conversations with me while I was still there.
Yeah.
And um I I yeah, he would have been fired. So Lord works in mysterious ways. Like I was pushed. I honestly feel like I was pushed in a negative way at work to the point to where God knew that I was going to quit,
Yeah.
that I was not going to take it anymore. I was going to give him the bird and I was going to leave. And that's what happened. And I left. But that's what was going to be needed for me to quit.
Yeah.
And so God pushed me in that way so I would quit. And I did, but not knowing, but like hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
And so not knowing beforehand, like I didn't know like this is what God wanted me to do.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool that like it's cool. You're in an interesting position where you can see not only the blessing to your life, being in a different job, feeling better about it, not having those same negative feelings, but you can also see the blessing that it was for your brother
Yeah.
to, directly be able to continue being employed and have a position and stuff. I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
I also think it's cool that like we're not perfect, you
I
and
am.
I. I mean, you are. Yes, you're right. Forgive me. um, we're not perfect, and we haven't been perfect throughout our entire lives. Just like the sons of Mosiah and Alma and stuff. Uh, you know, Originally they were fighting against the church and doing everything they could to bring it down. They have their great marvelous experience, and then here they are, months later, preaching the gospel, living the gospel to God's will, and doing it very successfully. Like it gives us hope for the times when we might be struggling with different things, or the times in our lives when we've had troubles. And like there's always a road back. There's always redemption that can come, as long as we're willing to turn towards it and to strive to follow God's will and to live our lives in a way that would be pleasing and acceptable unto him. And it's cool that like that's how you find joy, is by doing this. um Happiness and stuff can come, moments can come worldly, but like to find true joy, like the sons of Mosiah have when they realize that they're all still followers of Christ, they get back together. um I remember reading that as a missionary and stuff, and just thinking that it was pretty cool that they really, like, the joy comes from God, and it comes when we submit to him and do our best to follow him,
Mhm.
in our lives, with our wives, with our kids. Like, if you're doing things the way that he would, it's joyful, even when you're in horrible situations, or even when you're in struggles and hard things that are happening. And I think that's a testament of how important the gospel is, and how important religion and all these things that we talk about at Wilding the Lamb, how that all wraps into what we're trying to do with the podcast. Help others find that joy. Help others learn that by being a man, accepting responsibility, following God, all these things line in together to help us live better lives and to help us become more than what we could just be by ourselves. And I'm proud to talk about it and do it with you, because I truly believe you have a lot of these qualifications and these attributes that these men in the scriptures have. I see it as a father. I see it as a person, as a jujitsu combatant. like you really display all of this, and I think it's cool to be able to learn from you and learn with you together as we go through life, and to see like how far we've come. Like it's pretty cool that we've known each other since we were like tiny.
Yeah.
Because like I wouldn't have imagined us 20 years later like coming together and talking about Christ and talking about religion and stuff in a room.
Dude, it's been more than 20 years.
It's been a long time.
It's been, because I was 13. Thanks for all that stuff you said, by the way. But I was 13 when we moved in next door to you guys.
Yeah.
And so you were like, how old are you now?
I'm 32.
You're,
So
you're only 32?
I know.
Holy crap.
I was like 8, dude.
Dude.
I was young, man.
37, you're 7 years younger than me.
Yeah.
So you were 6.
Yeah.
You were 6 when I moved in.
Super young. Freak yeah. Dude,
that makes sense why I was able to pick you up and make you do backflips.
Yeah. Yeah, I was tiny, dude. Yeah.
So funny. Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
But it's cool. Like there's no way. There's no way.
No, I'm just saying, hey, by the way, in 25 years, we're going to be doing a podcast together.
Yeah.
What the hell's a podcast?
And like about religion, I didn't know you super well, but like, I mean, as a teenager, you're not like super into the gospel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I didn't. I sat in the hallway at church for like, I'm pretty sure it was like 2 years.
Dude, everyone did, man.
But I didn't go in to the chapel at all. Like I literally came to church and sat in the hallway until church was over.
You still do that, dude.
It's funny because it's actually true. I still go into the chapel. I go into the chapel. I go to sacrament meeting. And I have,
oh my gosh.
And I've started going to elders quorum.
What?
I have been for a while now.
Dude,
I've been going to elders quorum mainly like for my dad. Because he says like it's like the highlight of his Sunday going to elders quorum with his son. I'm like, gosh dang it.
ropes you in with that tearjerker.
So I'm like, fine, I'll go.
No, that's
so
cool.
I go for that.
Yeah.
And then Sunday school. I only started going to Sunday school because they started doing it in the chapel.
Yeah.
And I can sit on the pews on the soft chairs in the back. So that's it. Like if they go back to into the gym with all those hard chairs, I ain't going again.
Not happening.
Nope. I'm going right back to the couch.
No, but it's cool. It's cool how God works in our lives.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have thought it. And then I mean, when I was 17 and 18, I wouldn't have thought that I would have done this either. Or like wanted to do this, wanted to spend time talking about this type of stuff.
Rise up, endure the path of perseverance sure. With every trial we stand tall, our faith in God our all is.